but I think we can probably get started. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the May 23rd, 2024 meeting of the Transportation, uh, Public Transit and Street Safety Committee. So today's agenda, I'm going to give a couple updates on some things, and then our primary focus is discussing what our budget priorities are to all the members of the committee. I had previously sent you a spreadsheet that shows you what we've done for the last 2 years and includes descriptions of our priorities. The task for us tonight is to determine if there's anything that needs to be added or removed from that list, if any of the priorities need to change up or down, and also to just have a look at the way some of the priorities are written to see if we can edit those to make them more palatable to the agencies that we're going to be requesting for feedback from. Overall, the board's received feedback from agencies that sometimes our descriptions like we might group a bunch of things and it's hard for them to give a response when items are grouped. It's easier if we break them out. But then that uses more slots as well. So it's a tug and pull on the best way for us to do things. Just to get started, I wanted to give a quick update on a couple things that are happening in the area. You'll recall that we had a request from DOT for a letter asking about changing 72nd Drive. Hopefully you can all see my screen and you can see my cursor circling the area of the southern segment of 72nd Drive from Metropolitan down to Union Turnpike. This is currently a two-way street, and there was a letter from residents asking that it be changed to a one-way, and specifically a one-way going south. We had sent back feedback saying we're supportive, but we want to just make sure DOT looks at the possibility of taking it north instead. DOT's responded that they've looked at all this, and they are in fact going to make it a one-way street going south from Metropolitan to Union Turnpike. The other thing that came into the office just a couple blocks to the west here, there was a resident that advised us that 72nd Avenue that runs down to Metropolitan Avenue, the problem is that cars were backing up from Metropolitan Avenue north, and that generally this intersection at rush hour, particularly the afternoon rush hour, was becoming a mess. So I actually went out there with JP, who's a resident member of our committee, and Christine Nolan, and we hung out at this intersection for about 30 minutes or so one afternoon, watching the movement of traffic. And one of the resident who wrote in, yeah, thanks Heather for the reminder that this is being recorded. So just you're on candid camera. But what the resident who wrote in had proposed is that we should change 72nd Avenue one way, make it one way and moving away from Metropolitan Avenue. But what we noticed as a significant problem was at this intersection with Metropolitan, you notice how 72nd Avenue does a zigzag to continue south towards Union Turnpike. The consequence of that is that at this intersection, you'll find two sets of traffic lights, one at each crosswalk. And what was happening is traffic would come down 72nd Avenue, then make a left turn to go eastbound on Metropolitan Avenue, and immediately have to stop because although the light was green for them to come onto Metropolitan, the next light they ran into at the top of the southern segment was red. There's only enough room between these two spots for a couple cars. And if anyone is parked in front of Nick's Bistro, which keeps lighting up, then there's even less room for anybody making this left turn. So what we've asked Christine to do is go to DOT and see if they could study this second light and see if it could remain green for a little bit longer. So in other words, this light to the west would turn red, of course, and stop traffic eastbound, but that its sister light wouldn't turn red right away. It would stay green for a few ticks and allow some traffic to filter down off 72nd Avenue and continue down Metropolitan and move through that space. So that request is in. We'll see what DOT does with it. Maybe that'll help alleviate the problem, or maybe it's something we'll need to take a closer look at later. Okay, so that updates us on what's happening there. And then the main purpose of tonight's meeting is to go over our budget priorities. So I sent a spreadsheet to everybody earlier that showed what our priorities were for the last couple years. And that's kind of what I want to go through today. I'm just going to share that so we all know what we're talking about. If I can find it. Here we go. This should be it. Okay, so you should all now see that spreadsheet. So we're now in the fiscal year 2026 to 27 year. Time marches on. And so for the past couple years, we've this budget is broken up into both expense items and capital items. Expense items are items that basically just require money in order for them to be accomplished. So it might just be paint, it might be a study, it might be funding a piece of equipment, those sorts of things. And then capital projects are items that are of a somewhat more permanent nature, generally will exist for at least 5 years or more physically. Anything that's involving concrete is going to be a capital project. Signs, things like that are going to go in the capital project budget. And the way that the New York City budget process works is that community boards are invited to submit to the city budget department those items that they believe should be priorities for funding in their communities. This is advisory. We don't actually get to spend real money, but the items that we identify as priorities, at least in theory, are supposed to be taken under serious consideration by the agencies and the city itself when forming the actual budget. So we try to do what we can to identify what needs to be dealt with in our community. And the way we do it here at CB6 is that each of our communities kind of work on their own set of priorities for their portfolio, the things that we're responsible for. And then we have a process by which we eventually combine all these priorities, do some horse trading, and eventually generate an overall list that we'll submit towards the end of the year. So with that said, our priorities have not changed that much in the expense category. Our number one priority for the last 2 years has been a set of different traffic and parking studies. We've also sought to improve subway stations and maintenance and security with buses and trains. We're still hoping to fund a community workshop on pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements throughout the district. Even have moped and motorcycle parking painted out, because we often see those on sidewalks, particularly in front of areas where there's a lot of food shops and close together. You'll see a whole cluster of mopeds, and we get a lot of complaints about these vehicles ending up on the sidewalks. And then for our capital budget, again, there hasn't been a lot of change. Installing elevators at subway stations remains our biggest capital project. We also hope to fund more bike lane projects. We hope to focus on identifying high crash intersections in order to improve safety to everybody. So these are the type of capital projects that we've been looking at. Okay, so let's start with the expense budget. Has anybody identified anything here in the expense budget that we need to either add, remove, or change the priority of in some way? Can't necessarily see everybody, so if anyone has their hand up, and try to use the raise hand function. And Natalie, feel free to participate. You're not able to vote if we did a vote on this, but we are happy to hear your perspective if you had anything you wanted to share on this.
Pedro's hand is up.
Okay, Pedro, go ahead. Thank you, Heather.
Yes. Yeah, I just remember you probably cannot see it. So for priority number 2, when it comes to expanding accessibility transportation, did we ever talk about? I know we've discussed it in the past. Essentially, ADA vehicles, aka Cantas and other kinds of vehicles which are made specifically for ADA people. They're more popular in other countries. I'm thinking, for example, the ones in the Netherlands. And I don't know if there's something that we can bring up, because I'm sure the legality of them is weird in the United States. It will be a DMV question.
You're talking about something other than Accessoride?
Yes. But is this only about Accessoride specifically? Because it seems to be talking about just improving transportation programs for the elderly, so those with disabilities. So are we talking specifically about Accessoride and things like that, or is the ability to give people the ability to drive themselves not something that would fall on this item?
To give people the ability to drive themselves. So, I mean, this as it in column F, the description, right? This request seeks continued and new funding to improve transportation programs for the elderly and those with disabilities, to include but not be limited to DFTA MyRide, TLC's accessible dispatch, purchasing GPS software for Accessoride. You're talking about a vehicle that would be, are these vehicles owned by the individuals, or are they dispatched by the agency? How do they work?
I mean, you can probably Google them. It's called Cantas, Cantas. That's the only example I can think of right now. But there are a couple of others, where essentially, yes, there are vehicles specially designed for a wheelchair to be able to easily go in and out, and they can be driven by the person. There's usually like in other countries, there's usually like programs to try to make them easier for people to get them, so that you don't have to rely so much on, transportation, transit, and other kinds of forms.
So I think I've seen the stuff you're talking about. It's almost like a motorized chariot that you roll your chair right into the back of and off you go. But if that's a personalized vehicle, you're either suggesting a vehicle that's owned by somebody, which of course the city isn't doing that, or you're talking about like a ride share, like City Bike for wheelchairs.
Or a program to essentially, well, that's the thing, because assuming they're legal, but a program to essentially to make it easier for people to get them, either discounts or tax breaks, etc.
I gotta say that sounds more like something that's a state or federal program.
That's what I'm thinking. So I'm not really sure if this budget only goes to the city, because we are talking about new elevators, and that's
this is going to the city.
Okay.
And I mean, it does go to MTA and stuff like that, but the primary focus of this is the city. It's for the city's budget process. MTA at best just kind of, goes along with the fact that we keep sending them these requests. I'm not sure they actually do anything with them.
Okay, I see.
This isn't actually part of MTA's budget process. It is part of the city's process.
Okay. So I guess we're saying that something like DMV is just out of the question here.
State DMV, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, do some research on it and work it up. Maybe this is something that we want to discuss later in terms of taking to our state officials to see if any of them are interested in sponsoring legislation that might create a rebate program. But I don't think it works for this. Is John's the next hand? I saw his hand go up.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I mean, I'm not again, I think what Pedro said certainly needs a little more investigation and possibly appearance, if not in a budget priority, then as something else. But I mean, I think in terms of where the city can have something increasing, say, the percentage of cars, both taxis and Ubers and which are accessible to handicapped people. Increasing that as a percentage. I mean, it's been clear that there were goals and they've been, I think, reached rather sketchily. And that's one way that would at least allow more options for handicapped people. You know, I mean, if we want to be more specific there, we might want to say that, and that would, since it would be something that, say, the Tax and Limousine Commission could demand and act upon and tighten their regulations, it's something we may want to pose. So that's, you know, that's how I would address that.
So this requests continued and new funding to improve the programs.
I-
Do we need to say anything more, or are we already
Well,
doing?
it could also be higher standards. I don't know what the percentages are, but I mean, to increase the percentage of the taxis that are accessible. And that would actually, you know, also be applicable to things like Uber and Lyft as well as the medallion cabs. I mean,
if I
you might
change-
wanna yeah.
If I change it to this request seeks to increase funding
Mhm.
to transportation programs or the elderly and those with disabilities to include but not be limited to the following. I mean, the DFTA My Ride is what helps funds the Uber rides, correct?
Um,
And then the
yeah,
TLC's accessible dispatch does a bit of that.
yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying that you may want to expand the number and also expand like the percentage of cabs that need be. I mean, oftentimes you would, if someone wants to get a cab, and if you're in like, well, theoretically a heavy wheelchair, there may not be many cabs that can take it. That, you know, if there are more, a higher percent, and if the TLC could basically act on regulations to increase it, that would be one area. So I mean, I'm just throwing that out. I mean, you know, I was trying to address some of the areas where Pedro was, and then I think we may want to tighten things up. But that's, you know, that's just my
Okay, so
suggestion.
I've added language to be a bit more specific about what we mean by improving and make this the focus of this in large part increasing the amount of. So it increases
Yeah.
funding to these programs to include but not be limited to increasing available vehicles for DFTA, MyRide, and TLC's accessible dispatch, and increasing accessorized vehicle availability, and then purchasing the GPS, which
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that's still a need, but I think hopefully that'll do it.
Yeah, I would, I mean, I think it would tighten it, yeah, so, you know.
Okay, great. Uh,
And
It's-
Pedro wants to disagree with me, I don't know, no.
well, hold on. Since I see Natalie's hand up as well, Pedro, I'm going to come back to you. We're going to, Natalie, go ahead. Just unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry, it's a different topic. So I don't know if we want to finish the current topic or come back to it later.
Pedro, are we on the same topic with your comment?
It's not a question, it's more of a comment. I just wanted to bring up that the mayor not long ago announced that they were gonna be lifting the caps for higher vehicles, aka Ubers, Lyfts, etc. If either A, they're electric, or B, they're ADA accessible. So essentially, if you have an ADA accessible vehicle, you can start doing the thing. You don't have to worry about the cap.
Okay,
So
great.
yeah.
Great. Well, we keep it as a priority that supports the mayor wanting to do that by saying that there's a demand for it from the communities. Okay, Natalie, go ahead.
Two things on my end. One, I was just curious, how do we determine the intersections that need to be made safer? I think it was like lower. I'm just curious about that. Are we looking at data of crashes, of cars, pedestrians, bikes, and other things? Like curious how we're deciding on that.
So on that one, let's put a pin in that. That's in the capital list, and we'll come to it. The very short answer is it's DOT's job to determine that, but there's more to that answer. What was your second item?
Yeah,
Is that
second
also
one
capital
was-
or?
Yeah, so this was actually something that's not on the list, but I was just
Cap-
curious if it was historically on the list. And that's safety, but specifically for women and like usually if we're trying to make a space safer for women, we also support other marginalized and vulnerable populations at the same time.
For
But
sure.
I'm just curious, like, I know I'm not super well versed about the area, but I know there's like some things like making sure a street is like well lit or like a subway station is well lit, right? Those are just examples. But I was just curious if that's something that we had prioritized or we've been thinking about in the past or
So
not.
there have been historically, and even in this list, some items where we try and promote safety. I can't say that we've ever done it in a gender specific way, but calling for more lighting in areas or calling like we have here, our third priority is working on cleanliness, security, and maintenance for buses and trains. We had a lighting thing for a while, but that was more like for Austin Street underneath a bridge. And I don't it used that might be Capitol. There was a particular issue there, and DOT had told us that they were working to put more lighting underneath. If you're familiar with it, there's an underpass that basically is what continues Austin Street underneath Union Turnpike. So it goes underneath Union Turnpike and then up to the top of Forest Hills Park. Forest Park. And there had been a lot of complaints about lighting being inadequate under there. And I know for a while that had been on our list of projects to provide better lighting for. I don't see it now, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the sequence of events was that removed it from our top 10 list. But that's definitely, I mean, that's definitely the very kind of thing that is one of the things we try to think about in terms of what the community needs are. So give that a thought, whether that's something we need to include. Right now, we're talking about expense items. So I think the two items you've mentioned are more capital. So maybe we can return to those when we get to that list. So my question is there anything else on the expense list that we either need to add, remove, or change the priority of, or change the explanation description of? Going once, twice. Am I missing anyone's hand? Otherwise, I'll move on to capital. All right. So my sense then is our list stays the same for the next for this coming year as well for expenses, and I'm going to go to capital. Okay, I don't see anyone yelling at me. So now we're on capital. So yeah, so our priorities here, we've had elevators at all of our subway stations as our top item for the last 2 years. We want to fully fund completion of bike lane projects. Our third item, which was new last year, is to fund intersection reconstruction and safety improvements. If I recall correctly, this became new last year because it was previously folded into the next item, the complete streets repair, construct streets, curbs, pedestrian ramps, and we had tried to break them out to make them separate. Now, Natalie, this is where your question comes up. So how do we identify high crash intersections? It is DOT's job to identify those, but they do have quite a bit of crash data. It comes largely from the NYPD. There's also something called Crash Mapper that we can look at ourselves online that gives you a sense of what crashes look like at different intersections around the area. So we have some ability, and we wouldn't do it as part of this budget process, but it is the kind of thing whereas if we identify ourselves and an intersection that we feel is particularly bad, we're seeing it, it's a bigger orange circle on Crash Mapper. We know a lot of crashes are happening there. We can proactively bring that to DOT's attention and see if whether they're doing anything about it. But in the first instance, it's DOT's job, and the purpose of this budget request is to say that we want to see funding for that effort. John, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just based on that and what you referenced in terms of the data we got from DOT, I remembered, this goes back a number of months when you did share that information, and one of the things I really recalled very clearly was in the what you could say is the streets, as opposed to the avenues and other things, that were going north of Queens Boulevard, really from like the LIE into Queens Boulevard, were the significant amount of crashes there, considerably more than in the other areas. And I don't know to what extent, by looking, maybe going back and looking at that, we might want to highlight some of that area. I mean, I remembered it was like, it was pretty stark in terms of the number of crashes or other, or things like that there, as opposed to the rest of the district. So that might be an area we might want to highlight, or at least research a little bit to see if if we might want to make a specific statement there.
There you go, .org. So
Well,
yeah, so let me. It's going to actually make me hit this.
that
So this is
crash-
this is our district. You see Queens Boulevard, we see right away. We see that our favorite intersection, Yellowstone and Queens
Yeah,
Boulevard.
I love that.
Yeah, Natalie, just so you know, there's a history of us. We're constantly trying to crack this nut and get DOT to fix something. So this is just in the last month, right?
And
April 24th to now. Or actually, it's just April.
yes, it's also incomplete because it's always behind by like a couple of months, like 2 to 3 months.
So if I make our start year April of 2019, you can see there's so many more. But I think this is what you're referring to, John, is where we see
Yes.
streets like 108th, Yellowstone. They really immediately light up. And of course, this also tracks our density, right? This quieter area is the crescents over here towards the left. Below that is Forest Hills, and then the Gardens, which has very few. But our major streets, be it Metropolitan, Woodhaven, Queens Boulevard, 108th, they light up. And that this, and as Pedro said, the data is not perfect. But this is a tool that we have, not working at the DOT. I would be hopeful DOT has even more refined data and do some of their own investigations to fill in blanks that might be left from the NYPD reports. But it gives you some idea that we have, with these larger circles and sadly some red ones which indicate a death, we definitely have intersections in our district that need some priority attention. So hopefully that answers your question, Natalie. And it's something for us to think about, is if we feel that there are intersections in the district that DOT just isn't looking at, that we bring it to their attention. And we've done that in the case of Yellowstone. We've asked them to do a safety study that we don't think they've really done yet over on Union Turnpike and a few other spots around the district. With respect to our capital projects, is there anything on this list that we feel we need to change the ranking of, remove, add? Or do we keep these as our? I will note one thing here, down here. So it's priority 8. It had been priority 6, but it's now priority 8 for capital, which was install an elevator at Forest Hills LIRR station. We can keep this for now. We're still waiting for a little bit more information. But I'll be honest, I don't think that this is going to happen. And things are moving fairly fast. LIRR is already starting to put out notices and marshal their forces to begin their renovation work at the station. So this might be a slot that we want to put something else in if someone else had a suggestion. But just to give you that bit of information.
It is pretty low, and I think I think we might want to keep it, and then when we go to the a committee chair meeting, it may go lower down, in the overall. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that's
I personally think it's worth keeping just for the sake of maybe seeing that we get as much from the MTA on that station as we do. We may not get the elevator, but we may get other things beyond what they're proposing now.
okay. Bruce, I see your hand.
That's just the relate. Am I on? It's just a related point that this has been important to this community board for a number of years now, and I don't think we should let it go. And especially since, really, to be honest with you, all we're doing is arguing paper. The MTA is going to do what they want to do in the end, but I think we should keep it on the list so they know we're not kidding about it, so we're not giving up until we absolutely have to.
All right, fair enough. We'll hold the line, at least on paper. To John's point, though, it's a fair point. Even though we're ranking out about 10 priorities in each category, the reality is that when I take our priorities into the all chairs meeting, it's really probably the top 3 to 5 priorities that are going to be the ones that I have the best chance of getting onto the master list. So with that in mind, actually, it's probably these top 5 priorities that we should be thinking most about, whether these are the right 5 top priorities for me to be fighting for at the all chairs meeting. And again, we're talking about elevators, bike lane projects, intersection reconstruction, and safety improvements. This one, number 4, so complete streets, constructed. This is mostly talking about funding for reconstruction of medians, repairing cracked sidewalks, adequate pedestrian ramps. There's an argument here that these are the kind of things that DOT's regular budget already kind of does in the matter of, that's just what they're doing. This is part of their regular programming. And in fact, the response we see here from DOT was that, yeah, this is what we're doing over the next several years. I think we've all seen on some streets, I saw it here on 63rd Drive and on Austin Street, where they kind of went along, and I think we saw it on 108th Street. Herb pointed it out, where they went along and redid all the curb cuts in those areas. So they're kind of already doing this. So I just put that out there in case we want to consider whether this should remain in the top 5 or if we should maybe, tighten up the description because it's actually something more specific we want. I saw Anicia's hand, then John's, then Pedro's. Do I have that in the right order? Anicia, you're up.
I think we should move down this number 3 because if you go around the neighborhood, they've been doing this. Most of all, like my area or Regal Park, they've been fixing the corner, make it for pedestrian safety. And I think we've been fighting for the elevators of the Long Island Railroad. We should move it up. That's my opinion.
Okay, so it's actually number 4 now.
Yeah.
We'd move number 4 down, move number 8, the Long Island Railroad elevators, up. Like switch them, a 1-for-1 switch,
Yes.
or just move 4 to the bottom and then let things
Well-
bump up a notch.
No, let's switch them.
Okay.
Oh,
John, you're up next. You want to address that point or?
Well, I think moving that one down that far would be a problem. I mean, if you want to move the LIR, the elevator up, then maybe you just move that up to like 3 or 4, but then move the rest down 1. I wouldn't deal with, I think that would be lowering the priority of the one that would be going down too much. I also wanted to raise one other, to get a little bit more specific, and this is an issue that I've been personally experiencing in terms of the within the things of improving things like curb cuts and things like that. I really think that if one takes a close look at the curb cuts along Queens Boulevard, one would find that a lot of them are, to be very honest, a lot less than perfect. A lot of them have considerable, they don't, they're not flush with the street. you do when you're crossing, particularly say in a wheelchair, or if you're just walking with a walker, you need to step up more than that. And I think that looking at the at those curb cuts along Queens Boulevard, it would show that there are quite a few that really are problematic and far less customer friendly than or pedestrian friendly than you would think, and a specific reference to that might be useful. That's one thing I would say, and I can talk to a few of them. I mean, one of them on the intersection of 67th Road and Queens Boulevard, but there were a lot of others too. And and it's surprising that when you're going to deal with crossing such a large street like that, that DOT would not give that a particular priority, but they really don't. And that is based upon my, for mine and my wheelchair's firsthand observation.
I can add something like, especially along the Queens Boulevard corridor.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would appreciate that. Yeah.
So I can make that specific reference, but then we're still with the question of what's the proper priority for this item? You know, do we drop it to the bottom? Do we only drop it down a notch or two?
Well, I would certainly urge not dropping it down to the bottom. I mean, if you want to put the LIRR a little higher, then you're not going to put that down all the way as low as it is now. I mean, the problem with the LIRR is it is not technically city money. It is state MTA money and federal money, which is one thing. Secondly, its chances of getting funded as we want to probably, not that great. As I say, we probably use that to improve what the MTA will overall do there. And the other thing too, I think that we would really give far less of a priority to the one that that it would replace. So I mean, I think if we do anything, we just if we make one like 4, then we make the other one 5, and not put it all the way back to the bottom. At least that would be my recommendation.
Peter, you were up next to speak. Do you have any thoughts to share on this issue?
Yes. So on keeping it or lowering it, I am not sure if the curb cuts program that DOT has been doing actually applies to this, because curb cuts is one thing, but complete streets goes into much further than all of that. Not to mention that I'm still very disappointed that they essentially do make all of these new curb cuts, but then don't do any neck downs, don't do any daylighting, don't do anything else. They just like redo the ramp and then call it a day. So I'm not even sure that what they're doing actually constitutes that's what we're asking for.
Well, that raises
now-
the question on whether we should change the ask here, make it more specific and different than what is already kind of their standard program.
Well, because the thing is that they're not doing the ADA the ramps as part of complete streets. They're doing that as part of the lawsuit that they lost. I don't know how many years ago. Correct? Or are we talking about something else?
I'm not sure if it's driven necessarily by the lawsuit, but yeah, they're not doing complete streets work. They're just making sure they have properly accessible ADA.
Yeah.
curb
So
cuts.
so I guess my point is I don't think it would make sense to get rid of it because they're not really doing that. And then 2, I wouldn't want to lower it. Now the Long Island Railroad, yeah, it does kind of feel like we're throwing the towel there by lowering it, but at the same time, it kind of goes to my question at the beginning of the meeting, which is if it's going to the city's not can't do anything about it. Like they're gonna look at this and be like, okay, thank you for letting us know. It really just comes down to like telling the TA to do it, which I think the letter that we're sending to all of the elected officials is more forceful than necessarily putting in this document.
And that has gone out.
Yeah.
All right, Heather, your hand was up.
Thanks, Peter. Peter and I were talking before the call about whether I should give you guys an update on the railroad. And since this has become a discussion, I just thought I would share with you a couple of things. It's still not a complete picture, so understand this is still in motion, but it is germane to your discussion tonight. We did reach out, we sent the letter out to elected officials that Pedro mentioned. Congressmember Mang's office did reach out to the MTA, had a discussion with them to basically ask the MTA to move the 2 elevators from Babylon to the Forest Hills project. Because for those not familiar with the project, it is sort of like, if you think of it like a value meal, it's sort of like they've got 3 stations packed into one project: Hollis, Babylon, and Forest Hills. So the full total price of the project is established. So whether you move one elevator from one place to the other, it really wouldn't affect the cost, which is what they have been telling us all along. Long story short, they have told us no. And they have told us that because Babylon needs those 2 elevators, 2 additional elevators, because they are a terminal, not a standard station like we are. And they also mentioned that there are some logistical problems as well with the elevator. So our chances of really getting an elevator at that station grows smaller and smaller by the day. Now, the Congress member has not changed the legislation yet, but I think we're getting to that point because I know that the Gardens is doing a walkthrough tomorrow with the railroad to walk through their final designs. They've been doing some talking about different things in regards to stairs and the new ramp and so on. So they're going to talk through some of that tomorrow. But I think our chances of getting an elevator are small. So it is up to this committee, not myself, because I'm not on this committee, to decide, do we continue to kind of, as to say it's an elevator project is fine. Do we want to pivot and call it an ADA project? Fine. Do we want to maybe move our prioritization for an elevator at this station to another station? That is fine. But I just sort of wanted to give you all the information, since you're deliberating on this. I wanted to give you basically the lay of the land. And we, I think, have really pushed, and I want to thank this committee for that very creative resolution, because it really helped us have a discussion. And the good thing that may come out of that discussion is that we basically said, well, if you can't give us those 2 elevators, can you at least give us a covering over the ramps that you're designing? And they said that they are working on it. They don't have a solution right now. But we're hopeful to hear back from them. The Congress member's office is waiting to hear. So we were able to sort of leverage your work, at least towards getting something else that we've been needing. So I just want to say thank you. And I just hope this is helpful to your discussion. Thank you, Peter, for letting me have the floor.
Thank you very much, Heather. Anicia, if I may, I'd like to call back on you to see with that information, what are your thoughts? Should we?
Just leave it the way it is now.
Okay,
Don't
so
change it.
we'll leave the elevator proposal at 8. And then with respect to this item, number 4, whether it's Anicia or somebody else who wants to comment, do we keep this in its position? Do we move it? Do we change the description to be more specific about what we'd like to see? Any more thoughts on that?
Do we mention daylighting anywhere?
Oh,
Just realized.
I like that. That's a good point. Thank you. Okay. So how about this then? What if we change this item to be calling for daylighting? That's a good point, Pedro. So if you'll recall, the board passed almost unanimously a resolution. Yeah, Bruce, I'm putting my thumbs up because I think you're the only one to have lost audio. But if someone could put that in the chat for Bruce, I'd appreciate it.
I'm doing it.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's a great point, because a resolution that came out of this committee was passed by the full board, calling on the city to daylight all of our corners. And what daylighting means is that 20 feet from the first 20 feet from the intersection, that no cars be allowed to park there, because it dramatically improves the ability of all road users to see each other. Drivers can see pedestrians and vice versa, and cyclists can see everybody. And that actually makes it safe for everybody. And the almost ironic thing is that the New York State law actually is that you can't park within 20 feet of an intersection. New York City gave itself an exemption from this rule a long time ago. And so the push is to get rid of that exemption and then make sure that those corners are properly daylit. And one of the ways to do that is to place physical barriers in those spaces that prevent cars from parking there. So be they things like granite blocks or planters or bike parking racks. These are all ways of physically guaranteeing that that space remains daylit and that everybody can see each other. So what if we changed this priority to be that we call, this is a priority calling on the city to daylight its corners?
Are you talking about, excuse me, are you talking about replacing or by adding it?
Well, that's the conversation for us to have.
Yeah, I mean, I could add it, but I don't think you want to just, get rid of everything else and then just put that in. I mean, I would say add, yeah, and I would even, put daylighting in a prominent place, but you don't want to just knock everything else out.
Okay, so like, what if we make it our number 2 slot? Since we did pass a resolution, since it's an item of the moment, this debate is happening in the city right now. Other community boards are passing resolutions calling on the city to do it. We know that the borough president, Donovan Richards, strongly supports this and has gone on the record saying so. So what do we all think about making daylighting number 2?
Are you saying daylighting alone or daylighting added to the other items that were in that number?
I'm not suggesting that we add it to 4 for 2 reasons. One, because I'd be concerned it would dilute its significance, and 2, because I think we already have an issue of there's always a danger that if we put too many types of things into the same ask, that it starts becoming meaningless to the agency. And we've gotten agency feedback in the past. Thank you, Salwa. We've gotten feedback in the past. I hope you can still hear me, but my camera keeps cutting out.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
So
good.
you would make a new number 4, a number 2, and move everything else down.
Everything would drop 1.
Okay, I think that would be okay. It's okay with me.
Okay, brilliant. So,
I support it.
anyone opposed to that proposal?
That's a good idea.
I'm not hearing any. Okay, so I'll fill in the rest of the explanation later, but we'll make our second ask. So we're keeping elevators at subways as 1, 2 now becomes daylighting, and then everything would drop down 1. Is there anything else on this list between items? What would be the new item 3? That would kick off funding LIE sound abatement, but honestly, these 2, that's 1, a state highway, and 2, these sound abatement projects, I'm not sure of their value, to be honest. But yeah, so my question right now is, like, I don't know if that we're actually, this is something that's addressed, particularly number 10, the one that would be bumped, since this is a state DOT. That our DOT did respond, pointing out that it's a state DOT issue and that they have forwarded the request to the state. So I guess that's positive. They at least know the request is out there. But is anyone upset knowing that this item will now be bumped off of our top 10 list? Anyone want to try and save it for any reason? Okay.
If there's anything you may want to do is that more important than Jackie Robinson? I mean, I'm just wondering there. I
Oh,
mean,
like
the-
should we flip them to keep the
yeah,
LAE?
I would, yeah, I mean, I'm just throwing this out. I mean, it would seem to me, again, that the LIE, which is really goes right by a lot of high density buildings, for an extension, may very well have greater impact than the Jackie Robinson. I mean, some people who live by the Jackie Robinson may disagree with me, but I would kind of just out of my gut see that the impact of the LIE is a little bit stronger. So, I mean, I would basically say we may want to make make that the number 10 and move the Jackie Robinson out.
How is that analysis affected though by the acknowledgement that the Jackie Robinson is within city jurisdiction, whereas the
Oh.
LIE is state?
On that, okay, if that's the major factor, then Jackie Robinson should go in simply because the city has a greater amount of control over it. So, okay, then asked and answered.
Pedro, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely I agree with John's logic. Higher density means more people are affected. I didn't know that Jackie Robinson was state as well. So yeah, I'm now kind of stumped actually, I guess.
Yeah, as you can see in this column G, the for the Jackie Robinson, they're like, okay, well, you talk to the borough commissioner to discuss this request, so they accept it's within their jurisdiction. But then for the LAE, there's like that's state DOT. We've told them about it, and that's all they can do.
Can we just get rid of the Jackie Robinson?
Well, right now that would be currently it would be sitting in the 10 spot.
No, I mean get rid of the Jackie Robinson as a
Oh. Well, that would be a capital project to delete the Jackie Robinson Expressway. It's an
okay,
idea.
buses.
We'll let people sit on that thought for a moment. Natalie, your hand went up. Go ahead.
Yeah, speaking of the LAE, I just had a question because there's a lot of trash along the LAE and also the Grand Central here on this side. Is that I heard that that's under DOT jurisdiction and not under New York City Parks. Would those be the same folks that we'd speak to about planting trees and shrubbery?
So, no. And actually, now that you have me thinking about it a bit more, I think in terms of the agency that this should go out to, I'm not sure if it's only DOT. It might also be parks. Parks are generally often the same folks that do trees and whatnot. Your question though about garbage, that would be an expense item. And again, I'm not sure if it's DOT or sanitation that would be most responsible for doing that. But yeah. So are you looking to turn that into an item to add to our priorities, or you're just asking for information?
I both, I would say. I do though think that the other things on this list are, higher priority, and I know I don't have jurisdiction right now to vote. It's just, yeah, I live right by the Pat Dolan Trail, and I hosted a cleanup like 2 months ago around the trail, and everything's clean. But when you go in, or like when you look around the highway, there's so much trash, and we're not allowed to go in there to clean it up because of the risk of falling into the highway. And I'm talking specifically about the Grand Central. And there's just like computers there. Yeah. So I wasn't sure if that fell under this committee or the Parks and Beautification Committee and the Environment Committee. But I do remember hearing that it doesn't fall under Parks and it's under DOT because it's owned by the highway.
Okay. I'm going to put a pin in that for now. It would be on the expense list, not the capital. So I want to stay with capital and finish this, and then we can see if people want to go back and revisit expense for this item. But it's still the kind of thing that we can just bring to their attention now. Like, that's the other thing. Although we're doing this work for the budget, there's nothing that stops us, and we regularly send letters or even, you know, just pick up the phone and speak to our agency partners and ask them to address these issues. So that particular item, we will, you know, I'll make sure that the office is aware and see if they can reach out, identify what the proper agency is. We have 3 candidates, DOT, Parks, and Sanitation, and see if they can put in a request for, you know, trying to do more on that issue. Howard, your hand is up.
Yeah, I get it. You were talking about the Grand Central with the garbage. It's between the sanitation and the TOT, but they both help out and clean up the highways. I've seen them on the highways. They
Okay.
both. Just want to let you know.
Great, thank you, Howard. Okay, so you know, we'll do that. We'll bring this. We'll put it in through the office and see if our office can reach out to those 2 agencies, and see if we can get them to bump it up on their priority list and do a bit more of that, so that it doesn't build up as much. Okay, so let's finish off this capital request. Are there any other changes that we want to consider for our capital budget priorities? I'm not seeing any hands going up. Call out loud if I've missed you. Oh, Pedro, you caught it. Go ahead.
Yes, so number 7 for 2025, fund new speed bumps for the district. Did we wait? Hold on. Oh, including include but not limited. So that means we're not only doing one, but so speed bumps we always had issues with because of the whole bus situation. They're like the most requested thing DOT ever gets. But I don't know if I don't know if anyone here has seen. I think TA put they made like a website explaining alternatives to speed bumps that you can create without they don't mess with buses and stuff like that. And it usually comes down to like neck downs, chicanes, etc. Do we want to specifically say speed bumps, or do we want to say speed bumps, chicanes, etc., or just try to do speed reducing? Actually, I don't want to say speed reducing because that's very vague. I would say actually list out speed bumps, chicanes, neck downs, etc. I can send you the link.
Yeah, I mean, the streets that we identified didn't have bus traffic, so bus traffic can be a problem for us, but it's not necessarily a problem for a lot of the speed humps that would go into the neighborhood. I have no problem changing this to fund new speed humps, curb extensions, and chicanes. Is everyone else okay with us just adding that language in here so that we're asking DOT to look at multiple solutions rather than just the one?
Can I ask a really stupid question? What are chicanes?
So
I mean, I don't know. It would sound more like chicanery, but I don't know.
no, what it is a straight wide road is a fast road by design.
Right.
And so the goal is to keep it from being wide and keep it from being straight. And chicanes accomplish that. And you can do chicanes both in a very direct and physical way, basically like a mid-block bulb out of the curb so that the cars have to go to the left and then come back right. That naturally slows them down. You can even do it by alternating parking. If it's a narrower street and maybe you don't have parking on both sides, you can alternate the parking. So sometimes it's on one side, sometimes it's on the other side, and this does the same effect. You can do it like by building out. In fact, I've seen this where they build out, their rain gardens that DEP has been championing to help with water runoff. They'll do that. They'll build it right out into the street rather than just on the sidewalk, and that serves as a chicane.
Okay, well, you learn something every day.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not hearing any organized opposition to this. I'm going to add in speed humps, curb extensions, and chicanes. And then I'll add that same language in the next column. Okay. Okay, that's good. Anything else that we need to do? It doesn't seem like anyone's feels we need to reassign any more priorities. Is that correct? Salwa asks, any flooding related asks? Good question. No. Yeah, so that's a good question. So we don't, do we want to put in some stuff here? In the past, we've had it's not in the last 2 years, but I know previously we've had asks on our capital budget for upgrading sewers. We could also put in, those rain gardens, increasing number of trees, tree pits, they help. Anything that changes over concrete and asphalt services to permeable services help with rainwater runoff and retention.
Wouldn't we work that out with like the on DEP and on that matter? I mean, it could be something joint, but we may want to discuss that, say, at the committee chairs meeting to pull that in. I mean, I see this as more DEP, frankly, than DOT. That's my, initial.
I think you're right
reaction.
that DEP, particularly for tree pits and rainwater, is going to be DEP in parks. But that doesn't mean that's outside of our purview.
Right.
And you're right. It's the kind of thing where we can list it here, and then that's the thing that I then work with the environmental and parks chairs to say maybe this is something we can jointly push up as a priority for the master list. Pedro?
I wanted to definitely second that, which is that there is definitely a big aspect from DOT because the biggest thing that one of the biggest contributors to flooding is just asphalt. Like rain falls, can't go anywhere, amounts, and then it floods someone's house or a street. So I definitely think that we should put something. I'm not sure where in the priority, but this is a big issue that's getting more and more and more news coverage every year because every year we get more and more flooding. But I mean, kind of mentioned in the chat, but essentially the paving, like there's just a lot of asphalt in Queens, and it's kind of just like leading to a lot of this. So I know, for example, for the capital project of Queens Boulevard, I mentioned that given that we're going to be moving the bus stops to make sure that doesn't go into parking, that becomes green gardens or something else. And then just overall maybe trying to reduce the amount of lanes on Queens Boulevard because there's a huge, massive concrete slab just collecting water. So there's definitely a DOT aspect to this. I don't think it's just DEP or parks.
Yeah. I think I'm, and thank you, Salwa, for bringing it up, because I think it actually is a glaring omission on our list. Considering, the way that the weather's been changing, more of our storms have become flooding events. We sadly suffered a fatality a couple years ago with a hurricane that came in and caused so much flooding that some basement apartments flooded, and we lost a woman who was killed up by Horace Harding and the Grand Central. So, I do think this is something that should be on our list. And if it is, as a very important thing, then we need to keep it fairly high on the list, and no lower than 6 or 7 at most, but probably if we really want to see it make it to the master list, it would need to be ranked at least 5th, if not 4th. Salwa, since you brought it up, do you want to make a proposal where you'd like to see this on the list of priorities? Is Salwa still with us? I can't see the whole list of folks.
I don't see her.
Oh, hold on.
Oh,
She ended up in the wrong room, it looks like.
it's in the chat, but I don't see her in the panelist.
I got her.
Okay, there we are.
Okay, now you're with us.
Hi, friends. Can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay, brilliant. There you go. Hi.
Yes. So, thank you so much for elevating me. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I think we definitely need to add flooding prevention, which is where I was typing as fast as I could into the chat box. Flooding related asks really high. I agree with you that top 5 would probably make them most salient, and it's really hard to because all these things are important. I'm looking at number 4, upgrade subway station platform infrastructure to improve safety. That's huge. I mean, we keep having incidents, particularly at 71st Continental, and some pretty serious incidents at that. So I definitely don't, want to minimize those. At the same time, we have flooding incidents that have also ended in death. So, it's wild. We just want to make sure to include everything. Number 3, complete streets, repair, construct streets, curbs, pedestrian ramps, signals. Number 5 was upgrade the subway station security infrastructure. So are we able to unite 4 and 5 as both platform and security? And then, our flooding related asks could be either maybe 5 if we are
Sorry
able to
for
combine the current number 4 and 5.
yeah, which are actually the current 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Let me see.
So you're saying basically fuse these together.
Correct.
I remember we split them last year because there was some confusion between the word security and the word
Safety.
safety. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. And also, as I was saying before, is that we've
You want that
we've
interest.
had feedback from
Yeah.
agencies that sometimes our asks kind of cover too many different aspects.
I mean, can I make a motion that we add? I don't know the language yet. Actually, maybe we should talk about the language first. Like, what exactly are we asking?
So I think we'd be asking for stormwater runoff mitigation measures to include, things like additional rain gardens, tree plantings, permeable surfaces. There's types of concrete and asphalt that can be used that are permeable or semi-permeable. Anything else that should be on that list?
How about just the paving?
Oh, and sewers, sewer upgrades.
You already included stormwater, tree trenches, and rain gardens, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add essentially replacing, concrete lanes with green lanes.
I'm going to give myself a workspace here. So You want to tell us what green lanes are, Pedro?
I just came up with a name. Essentially, just green space, I guess you could say.
So, like, I know I've seen projects where, they'll take, say, like a streetcar, a light rail line that's had been running down a street on asphalt, and they'll actually turn that area into grass, and the train line continues to run.
Oh, yeah, I've seen
Uh,
those.
but that's not really, we don't really have that situation on our streets yet. What you're really advocating is the deletion of travel lanes in
Yes.
favor of, I don't, on a personal level, I might be open to that, but I don't think we should shoehorn that idea into this one. I think there's a whole different discussion to have about, is it better for us to reduce lane capacity on these roads and there's several arguments in favor of it, one of which is this one, versus let's address, just, I don't want to conflate these two arguments.
Well, the reason why I'm specifically saying that, and yes, 100% reduce car capacity, yada yada. But mostly, I'm just talking about, for example, I live like right next to Queens Boulevard, and every time I walk out there and I see just how big of a massive concrete slab it is, I think about every time it rains and how essentially it's just like, yep, all that water is just going down into Lake Yellowstone and down into 63rd Drive and just flooding the whole area. And then I don't know if you guys like walk around Queens Boulevard often, like outside of rush hour. Most of the day is completely empty, and it's kind of insane how because like all of that is costing us flooding, and yet it's massively underused except for like a couple of hours during the day. So that's what I was
I hear
thinking
you,
about.
and personally, I totally agree. But I really think
Yeah.
that's a much larger conversation
Mhm.
that we should keep separate because, before we take a policy position on this kind of document that stands for delete lanes on Queens Boulevard, I think that's something that should have its own focus, discussion, maybe, public input. Before we start having that conversation. I don't want to shoehorn it into a budget priority document without that process. Even though I personally am totally open to it. Like I absolutely hear what you're saying. Also, keep in mind, one of the things that we are going to see, though, still several years out, they are going to be reconstructing the side medians completely. And that reconstruction is going to include a lot more landscaping and greenery.
Yeah, I'm using Queens Boulevard as an example, but you can take any street really. But anyways, I see your point. But so I guess you could just say replace concrete asphalt as much as you can with green space. Because we do have a lot of like concrete like spaces on the street. There are not necessarily travel lanes. There's just buffer lanes or it used to be a travel lane, but DOT took it off for whatever reason, and that's still adding to the flooding problem, even though it could be extra green space.
My typing is terrible. Get a bit more explicit. Wrong bracket. So this is fund measures to mitigate stormwater runoff and flooding, to include sewer upgrades, rain gardens, tree plantings, use of semi-permeable asphalt and concrete materials, and the replacement of concrete asphalt with green space, non-concrete asphalt treatments, including grass, where possible. All right, does that look like the kind of thing we'd want to do? Salar, what do you think of that? Is Salwa still here?
I don't see her again. Yeah.
You can't just drop hand grenades and run away.
Well, there she is. She's back.
Welcome back, Salwa. Did you hear that? What I just said?
No, I missed it, and I hear a laugh, so I missed something good. What was it?
Okay, so we've written up fund measures to mitigate stormwater runoff and flooding, to include sewer upgrades, rain gardens, tree plantings, use of semi-permeable asphalt and concrete materials, and the replacement of concrete asphalt with green space, non-concrete asphalt treatments, including grass, where possible.
Okay.
You
Love
like
it.
that?
Very nice
Excellent.
compromise. Well done, you two.
Excellent. And then the question becomes, where do we put it?
Right. Oh, I'm glad I'm back for that part. So if we're not going to unite the two matters regarding subway upgrades, because we want to keep platform upgrades and security and camera upgrades as separate items so that they get their due attention, then perhaps after those?
Pedro, did you have a thought on that?
So I actually say we put it on 3 and lower everything else. I think we I think we should take advantage of the fact that this is like top of mind at the city and in the media. I understand that means that subway platform essentially becomes 6, which I mean I do want that. The MTA is doing them, but they're kind of slow.
So can I suggest that we insert the flood mitigation into 3. So it would be daylighting, then flood mitigation, but also that we move up the platform doors to, let's see. So
4?
if that's 3, that becomes 4 or 5,
Mm-hmm.
like before the fund intersection reconstruction safety improvements. So let me make things look a little bit more concrete. So that means this goes here. Flood mitigation now becomes 3. And then the bike lane projects is 4. And then what I'd propose is that, well, the question is, where do we put subway station doors? Do we put it at 4 in front of bike lane projects? Do we put it after bike lane projects, but before intersection safety improvements, or do we put it down yet another notch? Pedro.
Well, if we are going by the idea that we have more control we have more influence over the city than we do over the state. The subways are technically NYC transportation, but they're still MTA. So we probably have more effect on the bike lanes than we do on bike lanes and bus lanes than we do on subways.
So
Right.
could we make it the new number 5? Actually, keep it at 5, but move everything below it.
So that will be 3 flood, 4 bike, 5
Doors.
subway,
Yeah.
doors, and then 6 will become
6 then becomes intersection. 7 is
complete
street
streets.
ramps, and then now we're at 8 is everything else. That'll effectively bump off both the sound abatement programs. I think elevators at Forest Hill should still stay on the list, but becomes 10.
I think we should move it to 10.
Which?
The Long Island Railroad's elevators.
Okay, yeah. So like if we, so let me make this change just so we can all envision it. I can always change it back if we don't like it. Okay, so that becomes 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh no, that's not an 8. That's a nothing. This is 8. That's 9. That's 10. And then let me just create a gap because these two now fall off. Okay. So under this proposal, we'd have install elevators at subway stations 1, daylighting is 2, flood mitigation is 3, completion of bike lane projects is 4, upgrading subway platforms, specifically the screen door systems, is now 5. Continue to fund intersection reconstruction at 6. Continue complete street work and pedestrian ramps at 7. Fund security and safety upgrades in the subways is 8. New speed humps, curb extensions, chicanes at 9. Forest Hills LIR station is now 10. That would be our list. Any objections to that? Is John Dereshevsky still on?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, good.
I'm not objecting. In fact, I think it's a good list, and I think thanks Vasawa for I think putting an important issue on.
Okay. Then let me just do one last call. Any changes to our capital budget list, budget priorities, or do we now have our list? I'm not seeing any hands. Nobody's screaming out loud.
No.
All right. So then that's what we'll do. That'll be our position going into the all chairs negotiations. One of the things I hope is this flood mitigation item. One of my goals will be to kind of work with parks and DEP and environmental committee folks and see if we kind of work together. And then maybe this one won't even count against our list. And then we have a better shot at getting some of these other priorities down here up into the master list. So I will make that effort.
I think that's a good point.
And I can help you with that if there's anything you need, Peter.
Thank you. Are you on either the parks or the environmental committee?
I am not.
Okay. Yeah. If you were, then I'd say, well, then when you're sitting in those meetings, take this with you. If anybody's incidentally in those committees, if we have anyone on environmental or parks, then if you haven't already, then when you have your meetings on the budget in those committees, bring this up. And that'll make it easier for us to combine, work together when we get to the all chairs meeting. Okay, great. So it looks like we now have our list. Unless anyone wants to go back to the expense list, then I think we're done. Does anyone disagree with me?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to call out that the next environmental protection meeting is on Wednesday, next Wednesday.
Okay,
I
thanks.
know someone in there. Maybe I can get him too.
Oh, I'll also kick an email to Matt, who's the chair, and let him know that we put this on our list and we thought it might have some relevancy to their work as well, and see what they think about it.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, then I think our work tonight's done. It's 8:30. This was really great work. I appreciate everyone's input on this. Just a tease for our next meeting, and our last meeting for the summer is going to be June 27th, the fourth Thursday. We expect to have Craig Chin from DOT. I'm working with Barbara and Christine to put together a list of things we're going to want him to be prepared to talk about. So if you have particular issues or things you're remembering we've talked about in the past, send those to me. And we'll edit up a list. I'm not going to hit him with every conceivable thing we might have, but we'll put together a list of stuff that we're going to ask him to be prepared on. And that doesn't forestall you from asking him other questions when he's on the call, but he just might not have answers for those things, and we'll be understanding of that. Okay. Very good. Then if there's nothing further, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Second.
The second has to come second, Howie, but I
Oh,
saw Salwa's hand go up, so we'll have her the first and you're the second, so that's perfect.
Okay.
If there's no opposition to doing so, we are now hereby adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody,
well,
for taking
thank
the
you.
time.
Thank you,
Thank
Peter.
you.
Thank you,
Good
everybody.
night. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Enjoy your vacation.
Good night, everybody. Buenas noches.
Have a great Memorial weekend, and thank you to all of those in our community who serve. You are very much appreciated. Be well.
Bye.
Bye.